Joe Henderson was an American jazz tenor saxophonist. The tenor sax is the larger of the two most common saxes, which are the tenor and the alto, and the tenor is the one that goes honk like an asthmatic duck at times. Um, in his late teens, he got involved in the Detroit jazz scene, which was in the mid 50s. Um, in 1960 to 1962, he spent a couple of years in the army and he got involved with army entertainment, so he started playing in bands there as well. In 1963, his recording career started, and he recorded albums both as a leader and as a sidesman, which is when somebody else is the leader and you're playing in their band. Through the 70s and beyond, he got involved in all sorts of things. He was doing his own stuff as a leader, but he also got involved with the band Blood, Sweat and Tears, and with a guy called Chick Corea, who came through the Miles Davis stable of musicians, and got involved in jazz funk stuff. He died in 2001, age 64, and he has a typically huge discography for a jazz musician. Hi, my name is Dan. So this is an album of jazz. So we need to ask the question, who was Billy Strayhorn, given that his name's in the title of the album. And he was a jazz composer who worked with Duke Ellington for nearly 30 years. I didn't know that. I had to look that up. Also on this album, we've got Wynton Marsalis on trumpet, who's a guy who I reviewed an album by not that long ago. And we've got a pianist and a bassist and a drummer. Of course, this is acoustic upright bass, being jazz. But not all the tracks feature all of them. So, for example, the first track called Isfahan, which may be my favourite, is stripped back to just sax and bass, and there's some really nice interplay between the two. There's other places as well where there's just sax and drums, it's just sax and piano. The different combinations are used in different ways through the album. There was one track that I recognised, which is called Take the A Train. Way back in my past, I used to play in a jazz band for a while as a bassist, and this is one of the tracks one of the songs that we used to do. There was another track called Lotus Blossom, which had bits in it that sounded like a song that I know of called The Lady's a Tramp. I didn't know if that was because Lotus Blossom sounds a bit like The Lady's a Tramp, or whether that's a jazz musician doing the typical thing of playing bits of something else and doing cross-referencing. So this is 1992, and it's quite late on for a jazz album that appears in this list. So most of the albums in this list that are jazz are in the 50s and 60s, which is when there was a lot of improvisation, a lot of experimentation going on in jazz, and all sorts of weird and wacky things going on. By this time, I get the impression that things have settled down somewhat, but there is an interest in jazz that's come through from the rock and pop world. People like Sting using jazz in his Dream of the Blue Turtles album, for example, and so I would say this is kind of more accessible than some of those 50s and 60s albums. It definitely kind of feels like jazz, without knowing if there's any particular subgenre that it would be labelled as. It's nicely done in an appealing way. It's not too weird. But it does have that kind of jazz thing of doing lots of notes that aren't necessarily in the chord that you think's going on. There's some really deft playing, especially on the sax. There's some nice kind of fluid moments where there's runs of notes, and you can kind of hear the keys on the sax going click, 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 click as he plays, and it just feels nice. So I enjoyed it. I'd say it's pretty mellow. Even when you got kind of upbeat, faster stuff going on, it felt like it was cool rather than frantic. So yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I'd love to know what you thought of it. So please talk to me through the comments box, and that's it from me for now.